I'm Charlotte Garrido. Welcome to Commissioner's Corner. I'm here today with Char Burnett, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's been happening in Kitsap County in 2009 and looking forward into 2010.
Well, Commissioner, you just finished your first year back on the job, so let's look back and let's hear a little bit about things you were really happy that happened, especially in your district of South Kitsap.
Well, I think I'd like to touch on just a little bit of the news in South Kitsap. Probably one of the big items is that the Department of Transportation finished the intersection at Burley-Olalla Road, the last at-grade intersection on Highway 16. It was a $24 million job, and they came in at a year early finishing it and a $1 million under budget. So the people who live in Olalla, as I do, are really happy to have a safer intersection for us to be able to access Highway 16, because I personally know many people whose families were impacted by traffic accidents at that intersection. So that was a really important thing to happen in the South End. Probably one of the most exciting things for me is because public participation is really important, and hearing from people who are working in their community or want to work in their community is very valuable to me. And in April of '09, the Manchester Community Advisory Committee was established so that members of the Manchester community came together to help implement the Manchester Community Plan. And they've been meeting monthly since then, and they're putting together their work plan for 2010, just kind of getting to know what it is that their plan says and what they're going to be doing in the future, how they're going to divide up the work of looking at the different elements of the plan, and just getting a sense of direction, because they come from all kinds of existing community organizations already, and how they bring the interests of those community organizations into something that is more coordinated across the community, and bring more people in. And they've already been very successful. We had a Christmas tree lighting recently there, and they had some wonderful music from community groups, community caroliers, and from the Manchester Elementary School, which was a real addition, a great addition to their events.
Commissioner, I know the food and farm policy, or you've done workshops, you want an advisory committee formed. How's that coming along?
Well, it's a little slower than I would have liked. We did get some stimulus money that helps us put together some energy efficiency activities in Kitsap County, and I've talked about that here before. We are appointing a committee of 15 people, and we're finalizing that as the year ends, and the first meeting will be early in 2010. We are using some of the funding, the federal funding, to hire a half-time person to help coordinate that. And again, there are quite a few things happening in Kitsap County, from the fact that Kitsap County Government's Solid Waste Division has a Food to Flowers program partnership with 8 elementary schools in Kitsap County, and that the kids are recycling their lunch wastes into compost that then can be put back in gardens and help grow good foods. To the Kitsap Community Agricultural Alliance, to Washington State University, and I probably shouldn't name them all because I'll leave somebody out for sure, but there are some fantastic things already happening. We have a team of graduate students from Bainbridge Graduate Institute who are helping bring information together about this topic, and will be working with the council when it's established. So they've finished their first quarter of work, given us a sort of a coordinated literature review of the history of agriculture in Kitsap County, and they'll be moving forward to help us look at food as a system, so that we're looking at not only at the food that we can grow and provide locally, but also how to better distribute that so that more people can have access. and that it can create much more economic development, many more jobs in Kitsap County. So it's a pretty exciting venture, and as we talk about it around the region, we're finding in Kitsap County a lot of excitement. We had some great applicants for the job, the paid job, as well as for the advisory committee. Really remarkable people, and lots of people who we are, because we couldn't put everybody on it officially, we have a real strong resource network of other advisors and groups for this group. So I'm going to promise that that's going to be my first program in 2010, to be able to talk about that and maybe even bring some of the folks who are working on it, because it really is a very exciting prospect, and lots of people are thrilled to be able to work on it, more locally grown foods, so that we're looking at healthier foods in Kitsap County and reducing our carbon footprint by transporting our food less distances. You may not know that the average food that you see on your plate has traveled 1,500 miles to reach you, and so we're going to try to reduce that number.
That's great.
Yeah.
And with the expansion of local farmers markets, especially in the spring and summer, and also a new grocery that opened in downtown Bremerton, Fresh Local, it's going to be easier and easier to get local foods.
And we still have people working on a food cooperative.
Right.
Yeah, and so there will be I think we will find ways that we don't currently know, CSAs, other ways to access some of that food.
Excellent, excellent.
And of course, you know that quite a lot was given to food banks this year by master gardeners and people who were growing in their local gardens.
And that's a whole nother thing, local food banks and how needy they are, especially this time of year.
Yes.
But maybe we can talk about that at closing.
I'd like to.
Let's talk about some big picture things for Kitsap County. Let's talk about annexation.
Well, that's another story for South Kitsap. This past year we had two one large and one less large. The city of Port Orchard annexed McCormick Woods, and then later they annexed the Fred Meyer, which is at the south end of the Bethel corridor, and anticipate annexing much more, hopefully even their entire urban growth area. They do have a map of when, what order they anticipate annexing their entire urban growth area, and we're still talking about what that means in terms of stages that they'll be annexing. The next step will probably be continuing up the Bethel corridor. And so that's a big change. That's a big change for county government. It's a big change for the city, transitioning all of the various services. Because there are some boundaries that are not necessarily contiguous, police service and some of the road, especially if we have snow or something, some of the road services are difficult, and so we've had some agreements between the city of Bremerton and the city of Port Orchard where the logical boundaries don't exist, that the county will trade and perform the work for some of the city's areas, and vice versa. The city then will do some of the areas that are more logically in their service area. And so those are some of the beginnings of the kind of cooperation that you need when you're transitioning the boundaries formally.
Of course, the other big annexation was the city of Bremerton annexing
the South Kitsap.
South Kitsap industrial area.
Yes. And one of the steps that's happening now is because they need sewer out there. They are currently the city of Bremerton is using stimulus money to sewer the Gorst area, which is long overdue. That has been a critical area of need for probably a couple of decades. So it's wonderful to be able to see that that's happening, and then that will provide a much more healthy environment for all of us.
And as you mentioned, that is funded by stimulus money
Yes.
to the city of Bremerton. Anything else regarding stimulus funding that the county is taking advantage of?
Well, at the current time, we're applying for additional stimulus money. You knew that we received $2.29 million in energy efficiency funds, and I think I've talked about that before. Interestingly, we received that probably in the spring. We learned that we had received that, and we've done some wonderful work on putting programs together, but have not yet received the money. So it's put some plans that are right there on the brink of being executed on hold. Some of the work we've already begun to perform, but it's really difficult in this economic time.
Right.
We understand it's getting closer to time, but it's not here yet. But we are applying for additional funds, and we're looking at some very common sense approaches to energy efficiency again, and weatherization is one. The first round, there has been quite a bit of energy efficiency money for weatherization of low-income homes that has reached Kitsap through other agencies than the county. But we believe that it's also important for folks with moderate income homes to be able to weatherize, especially a house like mine that was built in 1980 or before 1980. They tend to have quite a few little things that can, things that can happen to make them much more energy efficient. And so we're moving into that realm and have made quite a few partnerships within the county with organizations in the county, financial institutions, Puget Sound Energy, contractors, et cetera, to be able to look at how to audit the homes that need attention, and then who will be actually performing and trained to do the audits, or trained to do the actual kinds of improvements that are needed. And that's a good use of stimulus funds anyway, because it's supposed to create more jobs. And that's what we're trying to do, is make sure that we're using the money to create more jobs, and especially jobs that will help us reduce our reliance on fossil fuels.
Excellent.
So we're going to do weatherization. Let me just interrupt you for a minute. And we're looking at our own sewer treatment plants and the methane that they generate, which affects the atmosphere negatively. And we think that we can generate some electricity with that methane. And so that's one of the proposals that we're making as well. And then there's a business in Kitsap County that would like to create energy with their biomass. So we believe that between the weatherization and the creating of energy, that we are making some really good steps forward, and that someday we will actually be selling back energy to the grid.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yes.
So let's talk about the county budget. Just a little overview, your happy place. Long, hard work on the budget this year, and just give us a basic overview.
Okay. Well, of course, that's been sort of the overarching work of the year, and it has diminished our ability to attend to some of the would-like-to-dos. It's been a tough budget year, not just for Kitsap County, for everybody who lives here and across the nation and around the world. But it has affected how we do business. Our administrative offices are closed one day a week, as are, we're discovering, not only our cities, but counties across the state. We have reduced the number of hours that most of our employees work to 36 or even 32 hours per week with pay, which means that they have reduced their salaries by at least 10% and sometimes more. And even doing that much, we find that we have had to reduce the workforce numbers somewhat as well. And this has happened in stages. It's not one fell swoop that came in. We, early in the year, in late 2008, before I was here, there were some reductions. In early '09, we made some. In spring, and then a little bit later. So it's one of those things that we constantly are watching the budget, and it's pretty sobering to see that our revenues are not coming in at the rates they have in the past, and our expenditures need to come down. And so how do we bring those down? And we have worked very positively, as positively as possible, I think, with other elected officials and with employees in the county and with a citizens budget advisory committee. And just in any way that we can to begin to reduce our budget. And I don't see that slow, I mean, I see it maybe slowing down. I don't see that completely completed at this point. I think that we need to continue to be alert next year to where our revenues and expenditures are. We've found some efficiencies. I mean, obviously every department has cut travel budgets and supplies. I mean, nobody's buying supplies. We also, the commissioners and many of the other electeds and some of the department directors are paying our own entire healthcare benefits. We did have an 11% increase in healthcare benefits this year. And so our employees are not only having an additional amount of their copay, but they are also asked to pay some of the difference. We picked up 5% and they're picking up 6% of the additional costs. So I'm really grateful. I can't tell you how grateful I am to the positive attitude our employees have shown in partnering in this, and all of our unions and our non-represented folks seem very cooperative, and it's tough for them too. I mean, every one of us has commitments, financial commitments that requires some level of income, but just as we're tightening our belts, we're seeing that they are too, and I know that our taxpayers really appreciate us stewarding their precious dollars too.
What else do we need to look at for 2010? What will the county be really concentrating on and focusing on, other than, of course, the budget and keeping our numbers tight? What are the big picture items for next year?
Well, the commissioners, and I'm going to speak to that right now, are currently working on finalizing our 2010 plan as well, and we've been working on it for quite some time because we need to make sure that we are as strategic as possible too. So we had several pages of wish lists of things to work on, and now we're narrowing that down. Again, we needed to go back and revisit the mission and vision for the county to make sure that what we're doing is really directed toward what we say we're doing and what we are required to be doing. And the budget is right up there at the top of our list. We believe that the budget needs to be done more strategically in the future, and that we need to coordinate across departments in a way that we've been forced to do this year, but I believe that we can do even more collaborations in the future. In my past, we did what was called strategic planning, and felt that was pretty successful, and we need to be very conscientious about how to work with others and how to describe and detail the items that we need to be working on and striving, the goals that we're going to be striving for in the budget. Sustainability is kind of the overarching theme for the commissioners in 2010. But sustainability in terms of finances and the way that the county government operates, and sustainability in our vision for the long term for our beautiful and wonderful county and for the citizens who live here. So that we are looking at water as a resource is one of our major policies, and land as a resource. So that means that we need to attend to how we look at our responsibilities to this wonderful setting. But we're beginning to look, because of the annexations and the changing role of county government, we're beginning to look at whether it's budgeting or or other kinds of practices. We are a regional provider within Kitsap County, and that's a definition that we need to refine even more. So that will be a high priority in the coming year. What are the local services that we provide within the non-urban areas, but what are the more regional roles that we do or could provide within Kitsap County? And I think that gives us a lot more thoroughness about the way that we approach our work, rather than kind of going on as though we're just kind of the non-city. And I mean, there's city and unincorporated area. Well, what is unincorporated? There are still services required, and there's probably some economies of scale that we can accomplish if we work with the cities to provide some of the services that don't make sense for all of us to provide individually. So that's a pretty important new direction for us.
Good.
We, of course, would like to do more public outreach and involve our citizens in more of the things that we are doing, which was a goal this year too, but the budget crunch really displaced some of that work. We are using volunteers, and have been using volunteers for years, but I actually was going to bring a volunteer with me today in our office, because we've cut back too. We have three different people now who are working at our front desk, the reception desk, as volunteers for, one works 4 hours a week, and one works 3 afternoons, and it's just a great way for people who need a little brush up on skills to be able to get a paid job, but it helps us tremendously too. And then the intern that I was going to bring today, who got called into his paid job, is a young man who just recently graduated from the University of Washington, Tacoma, and wants to go to graduate school in the winter, but needed a few more skills. So he's working with us on some of our stimulus work, and putting together some of the performance measures that we might look in an energy plan for Kitsap County, which is required for our receiving the stimulus money for energy efficiency. So it's wonderful to have him on board, and he's just a diligent, great worker, and it would have been fun to have had him here to talk a little bit about his perceptions of the job and getting some new work experiences too. So in the future, again, we're hoping to make sure that we're collaborating with citizens at the very best level that we can.
Great. Commissioner, something on the horizon for 2010 that's very important, not only to the county, but to our whole country, is the census. And it's important work, and people need to be aware that it's going to be happening. Tell us about how the county's preparing for that.
Well, obviously the U.S. Census representatives have been talking to us, and so we are helping get the word out as much as possible, and of course they're working closely with especially our Department of Community Development. And we're encouraging people to remember how important census information is to us. I think they've been collecting the census for over a century, and it's one of the most important ways for us to find information about the population without knowing specifically who it applies to, but to know how many people live here and some of the patterns of work and travel and so forth. So it's really, really essential. This year's census is entirely the short form. In the past, you know, people would come to your door and knock on your door, and some would take several pages of information. This year it's just very, very short form, and so it's going to be abbreviated information, and yet it's still really critical to our being able to plan for our future. So we invite everybody to make sure that you are counted in the United States Census this year, and anything that we can do to help that happen, we will.
Great.
And I hope that you will too.
Absolutely. The county hired a new parks person, and I know that fellow is on board, and tell us a little bit about him.
That fellow is Jim Dunwoody. He's from New Jersey. He's been here, I guess, is it 3 weeks or, well, he's been here
Short time.
Long enough to get himself, get his sleeves rolled up and get right to work. And he's refreshing. He has some nice experiences to put to work here in Kitsap County. He is still getting accustomed to the job, and we do need to give him that opportunity. In South Kitsap, there are some parks that I feel like we need to be getting some programs that have been on the boards for quite a long time, coordinated more, and he's working with the staff to do that. So he's a charming man, and I think that he's a great asset to Kitsap County. I look forward to working with him, and maybe we should bring him in here for a little chat with Commissioner's Corner, or just all of his own.
Yeah.
You know, there are 78 parks in Kitsap County and 35 parks personnel. And that's pretty astonishing given the kinds of work that parks require. But of course, in this tight budget year, people are looking at the different departments and saying, do we really need parks as much as we need some of the other things? My answer would have to be yes. I find that if we have activities, positive activities in the outdoors for folks, that the likelihood of crime, for example, being reduced is great. It is also one of our biggest assets, these beautiful parks that we have. So we know that we're going to reduce the amount of attention that we're paying to parks, and yet that we have a very dedicated workforce in that department. And of course, last time I was on, we were out visiting one of those parks at Village Greens Golf Course.
Beautiful spot.
Yes.
Just a gorgeous spot.
And actually, Jim has experience with golf courses, so stay tuned.
Great. Well, we just have a couple minutes left. I want to talk a little bit about homelessness in our county, and also give you a chance to wrap up for the year.
Well, homelessness is a really a very real situation in Kitsap County. It's also heartbreaking. We know that people, many people are losing their jobs and then their homes, usually in that order. We also know that there are 136 families awaiting shelter that are not sheltered at this point, and that 60% of those are female heads of household and with children. That's astonishing. There is so much to be done, and even though many of us are cutting our hours and cutting our incomes and cutting our everything, we still have some benefits that need to be shared with those many people who have so much less than we do, and all those homeless people. So I did bring a brochure, 56 Ways to Help the Homeless in Kitsap County, put out by the Kitsap Coalition, Continuum of Care Coalition. And they're really simple ways, such small things that we can do to show our humanity and to make others just a little bit more comfortable in this really, really difficult time, I think is essential.
Commissioner, I think it's about time to wrap up. We thank you for your time and look forward to 2010.
Well, thank you. I look forward to 2010 too. Thanks for having me here. This has been Commissioner's Corner, and I'm Charlotte Garrido signing off, and I'll see you next time.